John said the continued rise in the price of diesel had made the price of the commodity to be doubled, warning that a total shutdown of operations by bread makers was imminent. The PBAN president Emmanuel Honora made the declaration during an interview with reporters. He explained that the diesel prices hike were taking a serious toll on bread production for its members. As a result, he called on the federal government to urgently accelerate efforts towards tackling the problem to avoid a shutdown of operations by its members. Last week reported how rising prices of crude oil since the Russia-Ukraine war began, coupled with exchange rate instability in Nigeria, among others, had pushed up the prices of refined petroleum products across the country. However, the price of diesel, which had experienced a near 100% uptick in its price on Tuesday, has continued to go upwards. The development had made the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria predict hyperinflation in the economy, warning that the federal government should take vital steps to arrest the situation. Asked what the implication would portend for the industry if the upward spiral of diesel prices continues, Honora said the ripple effect would have a major effect on industries across the globe, particularly in Nigeria, where there is yet to be a laid-down measure to cushion the negative consequences of crude oil hike. The Lekki Deep Sea Port in Lagos Free Trade Zone is going to add about $360 billion to Nigeria's gross domestic product within 45 years, the federal government announced on Sunday. The Minister of Transportation, Rotimi Amechi, who announced this after inspecting the seaport, also stated that the facility would begin commercial operations in September this year. He said the private sector-funded seaport was being constructed in accordance with the time schedule, stressing that in 3 months' time, the facility would have cranes. Commenting on the amount which the facility would contribute to the country's GDP, the minister said it will contribute $360 billion in 45 years, which sounds much. Amechi said the funding of the seaport was borne by private sector investors, adding that they would recoup their investment over time. Meanwhile, Amechi described them as embarrassing this recent halt and subsequent refueling of a Lagos-Ibadan train that was transporting passengers, but explained that the incident was due to the faulty fuel gauge in the train. The recent massive clampdown and destruction of illegal refineries also contributed to the seeming scarcity and hike in the price of automotive gas oil, popularly called diesel, in Nigeria, oil marketers stated on Friday. It was gathered that before they clamped down on the illegal refineries, the facilities were producing diesel in manageable volumes for the market, as this reduced the cost of locally produced diesel when compared to the imported products. This came as the Independent Petroleum Marketers Association of Nigeria called on President Muhammadu Buhari to declare a state of emergency on Nigeria's 3 refineries under the management of the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited. The National Public Relations Officer, IPMAN, Chief Ukadike Chinedu, told our correspondent that another reason for the high cost of diesel, which was over 655 naira per litre on Friday, was because the commodity was no more refined in manageable volumes in Nigeria. On the current cost of diesel, Ukadike said, it is around 655 naira per litre and above, and it is possible for this price to increase as far as the dollar continues to rise against the naira. Ukadike urged the president to declare a state of emergency on Nigeria's refineries so that they will come back to life. The Ipman PRO stated that the current situation showed that the illegal refineries were producing a manageable volume of diesel, but stressed that their activities caused environmental hazards, which was why they had to be closed. We'll take a final break and return in a moment. Stay with us. welcome back to the final lap of Business Roundup on Atlantic Television Network today. An international trade and relations expert, Adekunle Ayola, says the ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine and the consequent disruption in the global energy supply chain should serve as a wake-up call for Nigeria to that sector and maximize the huge economic benefits inherent in the sector. The Poland-based Nigerian said if the government had developed the critical sector of the economy, Nigeria would have been in a good position to become a major supplier of oil and gas and to other countries of the world in the aftermath of the outbreak of the Russia-Ukraine war. Ayola said this while speaking on the ongoing Russia-Ukraine crisis as it affects global trade and development in Africa. According to him, Nigeria will also be at risk of higher imported inflation, which could drive up domestic commodity prices. Explaining how the Russia-Ukraine crisis had affected the global community market, Ayola said Russia is known to be the second largest producer of oil globally. The conflict in the region would disrupt oil supplies, reduce output, and trigger higher prices. Already, the oil price is above $100 per liter, a barrel rather, and the impact on energy prices is already being felt around the world, including Nigeria. Ayola said it was regrettable that Nigeria, set to be the largest oil producer in Africa, does not have an operational refinery. Power generation companies on Sunday said the recent incessant blackouts across the country were because of the weak infrastructure of transmission and distribution companies had rendered the quantum of electricity generation in Nigeria inconsequential. Speaking at a press briefing in Abuja, the Executive Secretary, Association of Power Generation Companies, Joy Ogaji, kicked against the position of the Transmission Company of Nigeria that the GENCOs were to blame for the poor power supply nationwide. On March 8, 2022, the TCN ascribed the low power generation in Nigeria to GENCO's inability or refusal to generate power, as the transmission company absolved itself of any responsibility from the ongoing shortage of power supply across the country. But the GENCOs on Sunday countered the claims of TCN, as Ogaji insisted the transmission infrastructure put in place by TCN was weak. Ogaji explained that capacity utilization in any market was often used as a measure of productive efficiency, adding that decisions about investment in power generating capacity were dependent on expected returns and costs. The APGC rejected the claim by TCN that GENCOs were to blame for the low power supply in Nigeria, as the association further stated that GENCOs were also being owed billions of naira by the power market through the Nigeria Bulk Electricity Trading PLC. But the NBED disputed the figures quoted by the GENCOs, saying only companies with active gas supply and transportation contracts were paid for unutilized capacity. The head corporate communications NBED, Henrietta Ogomrore, said the claims by Ogaji that the GENCOs had the capacity to generate 9,000 megawatts was not accurate, as inspections by NBED showed that the capacity did not exist. Meanwhile, the Nigeria Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative on Sunday announced that 2,119 companies operating in Nigeria's solid minerals industry were indebted to the Federation to the tune of 2.76 billion naira. NATI disclosed this in its latest report of the mining sector for the year 2020, as it noted that Nigeria earned 624.45 billion naira from the industry in 13 years. The agency stated in a statement issued in Abuja that the company's liabilities resulted from failure on the part of the 2,119 firms to pay statutory annual service fees for various mineral titles. It said 6,010 existing solid mineral titles were valid as of December 31, 2020, while 7,605 mining titles were issued in the industry in the past 5 years. The NATI report, which was presented to multi-stakeholders in Abuja by the agency's executive secretary, Oji Ogbonoya Oji, indicated that the total revenue contributions from the sector in 2020 rose to 128.27 billion naira, an increase of over 54% from the 74.85 billion naira recorded in 2019, despite the COVID-19 pandemic. The NATI report also revealed that the sum of 8.89 billion naira was shared among the federating units as solid minerals revenue in 2020. A breakdown of the figure showed that the federal government received 4.07 billion naira, that is 45.83%. States and local governments received 2.07 billion naira and 1.59 billion naira, that is 23.25% and 17.92%, respectively, while 1.16 billion naira that is 13%, was recorded as derivation share. The NATI Independent Solid Minerals Industry Report tracked and reconciled financial flows in the sector, checked quantities of minerals produced, utilized, and exported in 2020. It also examined the governance and process issues in the sector, outlined key findings, and made recommendations that required urgent remedies. The report, for instance, disclosed that 71.1 million metric tons of minerals were produced in 2020. A breakdown of the total production showed that granite, limestone, sand, and laterite were the highest contributors to the minerals royalty payments recorded within the period. NATI further disclosed that 5 states of the Federation topped the table, contributing 66% of solid minerals produced across the country that year. The first state was Ogun, followed by Kogi, Cross River, Edo, and Bayelsa states in that order. On companies' activities that shape business investments in the solid mineral sector, the NATI report identified Dangote Cement PLC as the first, followed by Lafarge PLC, BUA International, and Dantata, and Sowe, with the highest production accounting for about 64% of the total mineral production volume in 2020. NATI further disclosed that total minerals exports in 2020 were 32.99 million tons, valued at $42.46 million, while China, with 80% of the total exports, remained the major destination for Nigeria's solid minerals exports. From the report, a total of 3.87 billion naira was recorded in 2020 as social expenditure, representing an increase of 49% over the amount expended for the same purpose in 2019. And finally, JP Morgan Chase Bank has countered claims by the Nigerian government in a United Kingdom court that former Attorney General of the Federation, Bello Adoke, took bribes in the OPL 245 deal of 2011. The federal government is seeking compensation of $1.7 billion from JP Morgan, accusing the bank of gross negligence in transferring $801 million to Malabu Oil and Gas Limited in 2011, when it ought to have known that it was a fraudulent and corrupt scheme. Nigeria is trying to prove that the legal agreement that led to the sale of OPL 245 by Malabu, the original allottees, to Shell and ENI, was mired in corruption, with particular focus on Adoke, who gave the legal advice that led to the resolution of the dispute by the oil bloc. JP Morgan, in its opening submission for trial at the Business and Property Court of England and Wales Commercial Court, said no court, civil or criminal, in any jurisdiction had ever found that there was a fraudulent and corrupt scheme as now alleged. On the contrary, it added, the Italian criminal proceedings, in which the defendants included many of the alleged participants in the scheme, including Etete, Shell, ENI, and various current and former employees of Shell and ENI, resulted in all of the accused being acquitted of all. Nigeria made a number of claims against Adoke in the UK court, alleging that he collected 300 million naira bribe in the $1.3 billion OPL 245 deal. However, Adoke has always denied the allegation, maintaining that a failed 300 million he did in 2013, 2 years after the OPL 245 deal was concluded, was being twisted by the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, to indict him by all means. He said he got a mortgage of 300 million naira from the Unity Bank to buy a property worth 500 million naira, but when he could not provide his equity contribution of 200 million naira, the property developer returned the 300 million loan to the bank and sold the house to the Central Bank of Nigeria, to Unity Bank in cash. In an FCT High Court, EFCC is accusing him of corruption over the same 300 million naira, which it says 7/2020 Rislanuddin Mohammed, former acting managing director of Unity Bank PLC, who is EFCC's star witness, stunned the court when he said the transaction with Adoke was transparent and legitimate. And with that, we'll wrap it up on Business Roundup for today. Join us tomorrow for another edition, or follow Atlantic Television Network on all social media platforms.